Hey everybody, KMO here, and I want to share a blog post with you. Not one that I wrote, one that I read. It is by Sarah Constantin, I believe her name is, and it's, I suppose I could look down and read you the full title. Technology Alignment Political Compass. All right, I'm pretty sure everybody's seen, the political compass. It expands the left-right, horizontal continuum with a vertical axis, and it creates a four-quadrant graph. Well, she's created this four-quadrant graph with attitudes toward technology. So the vertical axis is, for any given technology, whether or not it's actually happening. So at the top of the graph is, yes, this is really happening. At the bottom of the graph, nope, not happening. On the right, the left-right axis to the right is, this is good. And to the left is, this is bad. So this gives us four quadrants. The upper right quadrant, which is, it's happening and it's good, well, this is the optimist quadrant. The upper left quadrant, which says this is happening and it's bad, well, this is the doomer quadrant. In the lower right quadrant, or this is what she calls the striver quadrant, which is to say the people down here say they want this thing to happen, but it's not happening, and they're saying unless we change what we're doing, this thing that we want is not going to materialize. And then in the lower left-hand quadrant, this is the deflator quadrant. It says basically this thing's not happening and who wants it anyway? This is snake oil. And there's more than one type of person that's going to inhabit each quadrant. So for example, I think the deflator quadrant is pretty much the default stance for anybody who just doesn't feel like thinking about a topic. And this can be a topic that's good or bad. Like I remember in my peak oil days when I was super into peak oil, for a lot of people, who are just living their lives, working jobs, making money, raising families, having relationships, just, going about the business of life, to get this message that, hey, all of these things that you take for granted and that you've built your life plans around are going away, they're unstable, and you've been lied to about their stability. And really everything that you are, all of your base assumptions about how you're going to live your life are false. Most people are like, whatever, dude. And I think the whatever, dude response is the deflator response. It's like, I'm not even going to engage with that. If you have some premise that you think I need to take on board, which makes most of my life and all of my viewpoints irrelevant, I'm just not interested. So you take these four quadrants, the optimist, the doomer, the deflator, and the striver, and you can apply it to different types of technology. So let's go with AI technology. In the upper right-hand corner, the AI enthusiasts say, yeah, we're right on the cusp of the singularity. These LLMs, they're demonstrating all of these capabilities which were not explicitly coded into them, which means, this progress is going to continue until we hit artificial general intelligence and soon after artificial superintelligence, and everything is going to be groovy. And I like to explore that from time to time. I don't do it in these videos. This is like private time. This is something one does if one has any dignity behind closed doors. With the lights out. So yeah, I am not flogging, this wish fulfillment fantasy in videos. I would certainly find a receptive audience if I could just do that full time with vigor and enthusiasm. In the deflator camp, I think there's a lot of people who, it's like what I said with peak oil. It's like any story that you're advancing, which tells me that everything that I'm concerned with is irrelevant, ultimately, and that the things that I take for granted, the context in which I live my life is soon to be revealed as ephemeral or false or whatever. Most people just aren't interested in engaging with it. So, they take a deflationary attitude there. So of the four quadrants, the author, Sarah Constantin, writes that the optimists think the tech is on track to work and it'll be awesome. The dystopians think the tech is on track to work all too well and to make the world a worse place. The deflators think that the tech doesn't work and is a bad idea anyway, and the strivers have the rarest position. They think that the tech would be awesome if it were real, but that we're not at all on track to get there. Strivers think the prevailing paradigm is wrong and not going to work, or they think there is a barrier ahead, natural or artificial, that's going to stop progress. So something needs to radically change in order to get the awesome tech to happen. And the author, Sarah Constantin, says that for the most part in her writing, she's a striver. That's her niche. That's what she's interested in talking about. You know, the techno-utopian stuff, that's something to be done behind closed doors or in the dark or, you know, with somebody that you're close to, but it's not something to do in public. You know, plenty of people do, but, you know, OnlyFans is a thing. The dystopians say the tech's going to work all too well, and that's a horrible thing. So the king dystopian, in my opinion, is Theodore Kaczynski. He was never one to say that AI is not going to happen. In fact, I think one of the problems, one of the things that led him astray was that he took pronouncements by people like Marvin Minsky very seriously. You'll remember Marvin Minsky is the guy who in, what was it, 1954 or 56, something like that, he convened a conference at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, and he said, hey, let's get a few, you know, machine learning wasn't a thing, but let's get a few researchers together and we're going to knock out like artificial vision and natural language processing over the course of a few weeks. You know, these are the projects that take decades to show, you know, improvement in. So he continued to make, you know, overinflated statements about how quickly AI was coming, how powerful it would be in the short term. And Kaczynski was reading those statements. And Kaczynski was taking them seriously. And he was saying, yes, this tech is coming and it is degrading to human dignity and human freedom and we have to stop it. So he was, I guess, a bit more than a doomer because he did have this, this active agency, you know, in his viewpoint. And the only active agency viewpoint in this 4-quadrant graph, according to Constantin, is the lower right. It's the striver. Everybody else is saying, this is going great, we don't need to do anything, or this is going great and we're doomed, there's nothing we can do, or there's nothing happening here. You know, this is bullshit. None of those call out for anybody to strive, to take action. It's only the, hey, this could work out if we did it better, but we're not doing it very well, quadrant that calls for action. You know, I suppose Kaczynski was calling for action, but he understood most people wouldn't be taking that action. And in fact, he thought that the collapse, that the opportunity to have the anti-tech revolution, at least this is in his later writings, the opportunity to stage the anti-tech revolution would come in the wake of a collapse, but that the collapse would be temporary because there's lots of people who know how to get the system back up and running again. And he says that the anti-tech revolutionary's job is to stop them from rebooting technological civilization after it crashes. So there are different technologies that you can plug into this, you know, this 4-quadrant system and identify different types of personalities and, you know, different people. And for the most part, I'm just going to talk about viewpoints and not individual personalities. And this is particularly true of people I know personally. I'm not going to mention them by name. People I don't know personally, I'm happy to talk about. So we'll start with AI. And in particular, we'll start with AI as it stands right now, the models or the types of AI, because AI basically just means computers that can do things which used to require human cognition, you know, human skills, replicated cognitive capacities, replicated in machinery. So right now, you know, the AI technology that everybody's so excited about are large language models. So, you know, if you've interacted with Pi, or I've just started interacting with Claude or Claude 2 from Anthropic, which is pretty impressive, I have to say. It's got a lot of the same problems as the other AIs, like, you know, it eventually loses context. It can't really adapt itself to individual users right now. It won't remember anything about you in your previous conversations, although it does have a longer or a bigger context window for a single conversation than a lot of the other competing models. But because LLMs have demonstrated capabilities which were not explicitly coded into them and for which they were not explicitly reinforced, you know, they weren't adapted deliberately by their creators, and you can put creators in quotes if you want to, but, you know, they demonstrate that suddenly, you know, large language models that had not been trained to speak Urdu suddenly speak Urdu. You know, these are emergent capabilities. They seem to have these emergent capabilities in terms of planning and reasoning and things like that. They're not great. They're not great at it all the time. And certainly they're not as good as, you know, more narrow AI systems which are specifically designed for, say, creating rational arguments or doing mathematics or, you know, things like that. The LLMs approximate, without training, the capabilities of systems which are explicitly designed to do these these types of tasks, which is impressive, absolutely impressive. But the idea that this is going to continue to happen, that it's going to, the recent progress will continue at the recent, at its current pace or its recent pace, that it won't plateau until we have reached artificial general intelligence and possibly artificial superintelligence, that, as far as I can tell, is an article of faith. You can't look at you can't look at its past trajectory and say it's going to go in this direction forever, because most technologies don't. They trace out an S-curve. They have rapid expansion of capabilities for a time, and then it plateaus. When will it plateau is the question. And this is not a video for convincing you one way or another whether LLMs are going to plateau in their capabilities sooner or later. So moving on. In the realm of AI, the optimists say, yeah, LLMs, they are the shit, they're the thing, they're going to keep going, and they're going to get us to AGI pretty quickly. The doomer says, yeah, you're right, and it's going to be a dark singularity, it's going to be terrible. The AI is going to rob us of all dignity and agency, and we are going to be, at best, pampered pets, and at worst, pests to be eliminated. And this is like Eliezer Yudkowsky's position. The deflator position is basically anybody who's not interested in the topic. People who never liked sci-fi, people who were never particularly philosophical about how does dumb, inanimate matter suddenly develop, intelligence and self-reflectivity, subjective experience, that sort of thing. If you never cared about those questions, it's very easy to be a deflator on AI, particularly if you don't want to hear about how your particular industry is about to be disrupted, and possibly you, as a highly paid participant in that industry, will soon be cut loose because your services are redundant. And actually, machines do what you do faster, better, and cheaper. And then in the lower right quadrant, the striver quadrant, this is people who are saying, look, these LLMs, yeah, they're neat, but there's a lot of stuff they're not good at, and there's no reason to think they're going to get better at it on their own. We really do need to diversify our approaches, and that's a problem because LLMs are sucking up all the talent, all the money, all the resources, all the attention, and that's a bad thing. If we're going to get to AI, if we're going to get to AGI and ASI, we're actually going to have to break the spell that LLMs have cast upon us collectively and look in other directions. And also give up the idea that we've crossed the threshold, that we're already there, that it's just a matter of time now before this process scales up and takes us to the singularity. And that's the position I'm most interested in, really. As I say, I'm not going to be the techno-optimist in public. That's something to be done, with the lights out. And I'm certainly not going to be a doomer, just because the whole doomer mindset is toxic, and I won't, again, that's something I might indulge in private or in conversations, that are not for the purposes of creating media, but I'm not going to propagate a doomer mindset. In fact, I stand chastened by my whole participation in the peak oil doomer scene. The deflator category, when it comes to AI, I can't really touch it. It seems so contrary to obvious fact, but I will listen to deflators on the topic, as long as they are thoughtful deflators. Although the deflator quadrant seems to be the least thoughtful, although there will be exceptions. There will be people who say, hey, this technology is not going to work out, and it's fine that it's not going to work out. I would have to mention somebody I know to come up, to name an example of somebody who takes this position, and I'm not doing that in this video. But there are other types of technology other than artificial intelligence. How about biotech? So, of course, the upper right quadrant, the techno-optimists in biotech are the transhumanists. They say, hey, we're about to transcend the limits of our evolved biology, and it's going to be awesome. The doomer quadrant, the yes, it's happening, but it's a bad thing. Here you get an interesting collection of people. For example, there's what Constantin calls a left-coded biotech doomer quadrant. This is basically, left-leaning people who say only billionaires will have this. We don't want immortal billionaires. This is not going to be shared fairly. This is going to increase, the concentration of wealth and power. And in fact, the gerontocracy of the Democratic Party will be extended for centuries. They will just not let any new voices participate. And then you've got a cultural right-leaning perspective that says, yeah, this looks like it's happening and it's a terrible thing. This is playing God. We are made in God's image. We should remain in God's image. And we do not have the wisdom, in fact, to improve upon God's plan. It's a terrible idea to try, but it looks like people are going to. So take current events and somehow rearrange them in your mind and jam them into the book of Revelation, and it's the end times. This is the current form of the end times. In the lower right-hand corner, in the striver corner, in biotech, there are people like Aubrey de Grey, and there are others that she mentions, but he's the only one I'm familiar with, that are basically saying, yeah, there's all kinds of possibilities that are awesome, but we're not doing the work necessary to get there. And I would need to do some study to be more specific about his position on that topic. I'm basically reporting what Constantin says here. But then the most interesting part about the biotech, placing biotech positions on this 4-quadrant graph is the lower left. It's the deflators. Most of the people working in medical technology, biomedical experts, the people who actually work with this stuff, are the least optimistic about it scaling up quickly in the near future and delivering us to this transhuman paradise. They're the ones who say, look, I work with this stuff all the time. It's a lot more complicated than you realize. There are a lot of roadblocks that you don't even know enough about the technology to understand the roadblocks. When it comes to biotech, this deflator quadrant really is the realist quadrant. Not that they're right, but they're the most informed about the current state, and they're the most pessimistic in terms of, how dramatically and how quickly it might scale up to make us, turn us all into Wolverine, instantly healing, immune to all disease, not aging, or, aging very slowly. The people closest to it, the biomedical experts, are the ones who are the least likely to get swept up in the euphoria or in the doomerism. So another type of technology that people get excited about is clean energy technology. Of course, fossil fuels are polluting. They're not necessarily polluting, but they're changing the composition of the atmosphere to make it trap more heat, which is changing the climate, which will be terrible. Now, the extreme techno-optimist, I'm thinking, and she doesn't mention this in the article, this is just, me spitballing. The extreme techno-optimists when it comes to clean energy are probably people who think that nuclear fusion is right around the corner. I think the corner's a ways away, but we'll get there. But for the near term, it's not a panacea by any stretch. But Constantin says that the techno-optimists in the clean energy department are people who are really excited about, transitioning to electric vehicles that are powered by solar or wind or other renewable energies, that this is going to ramp up, it's going to be great. Now, the clean energy dystopians, the people who say, yeah, clean energy is going to work all too well, these are people I know. These are people I know from my peak oil days. And I used to articulate this point of view that, one of the worst things that would ever happen to us would be a limitless source of free, clean energy. Why? Because that would just empower all of our other rapacious activities. And it would allow us to, completely consume everything much more quickly. This is the position that is humans are a plague of locusts on the planet. And the fact that we're running out of energy is a blessing. It's going to save us from our worst impulses. I don't think that anymore. I think that attitude is really an outgrowth of misanthropy, which I will have nothing to do with. The clean energy deflators are basically people who think that fossil fuels are great. We got plenty of them. The climate change thing is overblown. We should just keep doing what we're doing. And then the clean energy strivers, I can really connect, with this quadrant on this topic. They're the people who are saying, and this is quite true, yeah, we're adding a lot of solar to the grid, and we're just using more electricity. This is the Jevons paradox adjacent position, which is, increases in available energy or increases in energy efficiency typically don't lead to less energy consumption. They lead to more energy consumption. And Constantin, of the people in this quadrant, writes, the clean energy strivers think a transition to clean energy is not going to happen without a change that doesn't seem to be on the horizon, like way more energy storage or adoption of nuclear power. But we should very much try to make such a change. So yeah, people who are pro-nuclear in terms of nuclear fission. We want more nuclear plants of the current types, the most recent types, but still not fusion. We're talking fission here, and not exotic stuff like, molten salt reactors or tiny little reactors like thorium reactors all over the place, but demonstrated technologies, things that are currently in operation. We need more of that. I tend not to talk about this because I know people, in real life who are, to my mind, fanatically anti-nuclear. They get angry if you talk about, using more nuclear energy. And I don't see a lot of benefit in triggering that behavior in them. And it's not my issue generally, so I tend to just, keep quiet about that. It's not something I feel strongly about one way or the other. So just talking about these 4 quadrants, not in relation to any particular technology, but just generally, she writes, businesses, startups, and their fans are optimists about their own industry, as are some DIY hacker communities. Popular fiction, books, TV, movies, and journalism leans dystopian. Academics and experienced professionals are often deflators, as are many normal people who don't follow a topic closely. So this is interesting. The people who are most knowledgeable and the people who are least knowledgeable about a topic tend to default to the deflator quadrant. Strivers don't seem to have a clear constituency of any appreciable size. The convergent research ecosystem, of which I know nothing, might be the closest thing I know of. And then she starts talking about interquadrant interactions. Deflators and strivers can join forces from time to time to advance the position that a particular technology is not happening. She says that dystopians and deflators are completely incompatible because one says the technology is absolutely happening, in fact it's going to work too well, and the other one says it's snake oil. So those two, they can't really make common cause. Strivers and optimists can make common cause because they think it would be great if this thing did happen. And, it's kind of hard to make common cause with the optimists because they think they don't need to do anything. But pretty much everybody, I think, at least intuitively understands or feels, we'll say, that human agency is a real thing, that we do have freedom of will, that we do have free will, we can make choices, that our choices do matter, and we would like to get to this thing. So, maybe it's worth listening to the strivers from time to time to make sure that the optimistic outcome, which we're pretty assured of, is actually in the bag. And then she says that the loudest debates, the most visible debates, the most high-profile interaction is going to be the competition between doomers and optimists. But she says that the doomers and the optimists can even make common cause through compromises. Typically, it's going to be the optimist who's going to compromise a little bit and say, hey, we're forging ahead to this brilliant future, but we are taking your concerns into account and we're making adjustments for them, or we're adding additional safeguards based on your concerns. All right, well, I've already gone much longer than I had intended to, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Other than just a quick closing remark, I'll say that on the topic of AI, I've actually inhabited all 4. I would say all 4 of these quadrants. The one that I'm, least anchored to is the lower left. It is the, the deflator. It's hard to be a deflator right now, with all of the recent progress. It's just hard to be a deflator. But this is also a very comforting quadrant to sit in. You can sit in a place of judgment, of superiority over the doomers and the optimists, who are both, just manic for no good reason. And, you can continue to make plans based on what you've known about the world for most of your life, that the context that you're familiar with is stable and reliable, and you can just continue on. And again, it's funny that the people who occupy this quadrant are the ones who know the most about a topic or the ones who know the least about a topic. It's funny. But in AI, as I say, it's a hard position to take right now, which makes it, which is the reason why I would have anything to do with it. I'm not interested in the easy positions to take generally. Which is why I'm absolutely not a participant in either the doomer or the techno-optimist camps on the topic of AI. I'm interested in examining the questions which get left unexamined because people are defaulting to these simplistic, sort of knee-jerk, either techno-optimist or techno-pessimist positions. And on AI, I think I do fit kind of neatly down in the striver quadrant, in that it is my suspicion, and this is probably, my prejudice left over from years of study in philosophy of mind. LLMs they sidestep a whole bunch of different um, conceptual problems in creating AI, just by stacking a whole bunch of layers in your neural network and not even worrying about, how to structure them. Just let the structure emerge on its own, and, Bob's your uncle. I tend to think that that approach is not going to take us across the finish line. That is probably, in terms of, the number of people who hold the positions, the most outlier position to take. So it's interesting to me. But, obviously I'm most focused on AI, but are there other technologies that you think could be applied to this 4-quadrant graph to generate some interesting results? And what's your thought, not just on AI, but also on energy and biotech? Do you think biotech is going to have a huge impact in the quality of life or the organization of society in the coming half century or so? How about clean energy? You think we're just going to be driving around in fossil fuel burning cars, ships, planes, motorcycles, or are we going to move to a souped up golf cart kind of model? Or are we going to collapse? Are we going to be walking everywhere? All right. Lots of places I could take this right now, but I'm not going to. I will just say I look forward to hearing from you. Stay well.